There were certainly tons of questions heading into last offseason involving the Philadelphia Eagles. Like, what are you going to ultimately do with Carson Wentz? Is Jalen Hurts really going to be your guy? Skip-de-skip, whoop-de-woo, blah, blah, blah. When we found out, they got the Colts to bite and take Carson Wentz off of their damn hands. And it was clear that you're going to roll with Jalen Hurts as the top quarterback for 2021. Then you had even more questions involving the hiring of former Colts offensive coordinator Nick Sirianni. Who's this dude? Ain't heard anything about him. Why the hell is he getting a head coaching job here? Lots of questions about this Eagles team. And I think for Eagles fans, there was a big part of this, especially with the way the draft had played out and everything, is that it'd be nice if Hurts shows some development here and Sirianni doesn't look like a total idiot, but I want Wentz to play every game in Indy because we want that second-round pick to convey to a first-round pick. Give us those 3 first-round picks in 2022, Daddy. Well, it happened. And something else happened along the way, too. Like the Philadelphia Eagles weren't an embarrassment. It didn't start off well, certainly. They were 1-3 after 4 games, then 2-5, then 3-6. And I can imagine at that point in time, Eagles fans are like, hey, we don't really care. We've already kind of got one foot out the door in this season, already kind of cashed out. Looking forward to bump up that draft position, baby. It's all about 2022 and beyond. Then this team goes on to win 3 of their next 4 before the bye. And you're sitting there looking with 4 games to go. The Eagles are in the damn playoff mix in the NFC. They're 6-7. Sure, they're not great, but they're probably about the absolute best you could have expected, especially when you talk about the in-season trading away of Zach Ertz. Like, 6-7 with 4 games to go. If you weren't just trying to tank this year because of draft position, I asked you about the Eagles and said, with Jalen Hurts, with first-year head coach Nick Sirianni, looking at this team, the Caps' trouble they were in, if I told you they'd be 6-7 with an outside shot at the playoffs with 4 games to go, would you have taken it? Probably most Philly fans would have said yes. And then cussed at Howie Roseman for taking Jalen Reagor instead of fucking Justin Jefferson and rage away. But they go on and they beat Washington twice, beat the Giants in between there. So you got that NFC least sandwich, and they feasted there. Going into that Week 18 matchup, you know, they really needed to make sure they handled business against Dallas. Instead, they got blown out, and it didn't matter. Because the Saints didn't handle their business, the Eagles are still able to, even though they got their asses rocked by the Cowboys, backdoor their asses into the playoffs. So this Eagles team, where it was more about the 3 first-round picks potentially they were going to have in the 2022 draft, and whether or not Jalen Hurts was going to develop at all, ended up getting a playoff appearance out of it. Now, sure, it didn't go well in the wild card round to the Buccaneers. They lost 31-15, and in fact, were down 31-0 after 3 quarters. That was kind of ugly. But, you know, considering where they were, not the worst result in the possible world. I think you could certainly say there are questions still to be had about Jalen Hurts and just how good of an NFL starting quarterback he can be. But, you know, maybe the early returns on head coach Nick Sirianni are positive. Like, to get this team to be 9-8, get them into the playoffs, like, that's got to count for something. And even when you look at their losses, 7 of their 8 losses were to playoff teams. You know, they lost the Cowboys twice, but, you know, they just weren't good enough to beat many of the good teams that they faced, but they faced a lot of good teams. Like 7 of their 8 losses were to playoff teams. Offensively, they led the league in rushing yards, although you probably wish Miles Sanders would have been able to stay a little healthier, play a little more, and take on a little bit more of that burden. Jalen Hurts, I guess, kind of developed throughout the season. Still think, to me, he's got a long way to go. Devontae Smith was solid as a rookie. You would have hoped for a guy that played every game that he would have been able to at least get over 1,000 yards, especially in the 17-game season. But certainly a hell of a lot fucking better than the last year's first-round pick, Jalen Reagor, huh? Holy shit. Like, Devontae Smith was a godsend by comparison and looks like he's going to be an 80-catch, 1,200-yard kind of guy in the NFL. Dallas Goedert stepped up and showed he was the tight end one with Zach Ertz being traded to the Cardinals. He had 56 catches for 834 yards and 4 touchdowns. Their offensive unit was one of the offensive line unit, was one of the very best in the league. Kelsey is still a beast on the interior. Lane Johnson on the outside. Mailata on the outside at left tackle was a fucking beast. Like, there were certainly some good pieces on that offense, some good stories. Their defense was okay, Like, they were 10th in total yards allowed, 18th in total points, really struggled to get after opposing quarterbacks. But I got to look at it and say, you went to the playoffs and you've got 3 first-round picks. You shouldn't feel all that bad about it. You've got about $25 million in cap space, so you've got a little bit of wiggle room if you want to get a little aggressive in free agency. But you still want to leverage that draft pick capital to improve your team both now and in the future, and that will be what's really interesting for this Eagles team this offseason, especially as we get into the draft cycle, is are they actually going to spend all 3 of those first-round picks? I would doubt it. I would assume they want to peel back at least from one of them and accumulate some additional draft pick capital for 2022 and 2023, as they need some younger, cheaper talent. And that's okay. They position themselves in a spot where they can potentially get that. Yeah, because even when you look at the free agents they have, guys like Rodney McLeod and Anthony Harris and Derek Barnett, like if you're an Eagles fan, will you really be devastated if any of those guys aren't brought back? Maybe an Anthony Harris would be the guy you'd miss the most, but would you really? Would you notice that much? You know, Derek Barnett was a former first-round pick, and what do you have, like 2.5 sacks this year? 3, something like that? Like, how much are you going to pay him? He's just not what the doctor ordered. He's not what you spent a first-round pick to get. He's just average. So you look at this team and you say, man, they had a winning record and they have a lot of holes and a lot of flaws, and they absolutely do. Well, they could address those in a big hurry and become a threat to the Cowboys in that NFC East. Number one thing they got to do is figure out whether Jalen Hurts is that dude or not. And if he's not, then you would have to think you'd leverage some of that draft pick capital to go make the deal for Deshaun Watson. Plain and simple. If you have some confidence in Jalen Hurts, then you stick with him for another year. Figure it out later. Which may also be why you want to store some of that draft capital and apply it towards 2023 in case you need to make a big move to go get a quarterback. But if you feel like a guy like a Deshaun Watson could really take your team to another level, you have to go get him. Did you really see enough in Jalen Hurts after 2 years to have full and complete confidence that he can absolutely be the dude and you don't feel like he's replaceable? I don't think you have. You may want to, or maybe you don't. I just don't know. You know, and it's interesting with the Eagles as I look at them, you know, they need quite a bit of an investment on their defense. Like, I know I spent a lot of time talking about you got to improve the offense, and that certainly is true, but they need guys that can get after the quarterback off the edge. They need linebackers badly, guys with speed, guys that can make plays, guys that can cover in the middle of that defense. They need some young depth in that secondary. And that's where the Eagles have to invest a good portion of their offseason, specifically the draft. Especially if you make a big trade for somebody like a Deshaun Watson, which is, you know, to me, unlikely, but we will see how things play out. We will see what happens. But if this Eagles team improves that talent on that defense of what was already like an average unit in 2021, like they could be really damn good in 2022, be a counter to the Cowboys in that division, they might have a chance to actually win that thing next year. But if you're an Eagles fan, you can't feel too bad about what happened. You really didn't care much about the results of the season, yet, and still, you made the playoffs, and now you got 3 first-round picks. So that's a reason to be optimistic about where things could be heading pretty quickly.